Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am very excited to be here today to be talking about a topic that is very important to our team and to you all as well. Today, we're going to be talking about how reading for pleasure can contribute to better educational performance and emotional well-being. My name is Molly McNamara. I am a marketing specialist here at OverDrive Education. And if you're not familiar with OverDrive, we offer the largest digital content catalog in the world to more than 88,000 libraries and schools in over 100 countries. We do this through both the Libby reading app for public libraries and via the SOAR reading app for schools. We aim to empower students to discover and enjoy ebooks, audiobooks, magazines, read-alongs, and more from their school, both for leisure and for class-assigned reading. So today, I'm going to be joined by two of my colleagues who I will introduce here in a moment, but I wanted to share first the agenda that we will be working through today as we talk about this topic. So today's agenda, we are going to start with talking about the current state of reading for pleasure. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why this matters and why should we care. And we'll move to how we can actually encourage more reading for pleasure among young people. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about how a digital library can help support students reading for pleasure. If we have some time for questions at the end, we will definitely do that. But without further ado, I want to introduce you to my colleagues who are here as well and who will be talking through bulk of the presentation today. I'd like to start with Laura Fergursky, who is an account manager at OverDrive. She works with international schools all over the world: South America, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. She has degrees in history, international studies, German studies, and a master's in instructional design and technology. Prior to OverDrive, Laura taught ESL for more than 8 years in international schools, as well as online all over the world, and has taught in US K-12 schools. So a lot of great experience and perspective from Laura. In addition, we'll be joined by Zoe Orcutt, who is a digital content librarian here at OverDrive. She works with international schools on our international collaboration development team. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and a master's in library and information science. Before coming to OverDrive, she was actually an academic librarian working with colleges and universities, and currently she works with school libraries and consortiums in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. So again, tons of experience here. Very excited to introduce them and welcome them. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Laura, who is going to kick us off on our presentation today.
Thank you so much, Molly. It is a pleasure for me to be here today to discuss this very important topic. I think it is very important to talk about this topic because reading for pleasure and literacy is a very hot topic right now. There's many organizations nationally and internationally, like UNESCO, National Literacy Trust, National Library of New Zealand, among others, that have been doing extensive research and trying to figure out how we kind of combat this problem of increasing literacy and increasing reading for pleasure. So I thought it'd be a great place to talk about where are we at in terms of reading for pleasure. So reading for pleasure is both an independent and social practice. So research shows that the benefits of reading for pleasure are extensive and long-reaching. So where are we currently? Next slide. Recently, the annual literacy survey by the National Literacy Trust did some research on how literacy is currently in the UK. So they found in the UK, based on over 71,000 responses of children between the ages of 5 and 18, that about 2 in 5 children and young adults are actually enjoying reading for pleasure. Unfortunately, that's the lowest level of reading enjoyment since the 2005 survey that they started with. They also found that fewer boys than girls actually enjoyed reading, but they've also noticed that enjoyment by girls reading has also lowered in the last few years. And then fewer than 3 in 10 children actually read on a daily basis, which is an alarming 26% drop since 2005. Obviously, this represents the UK, but other research done in New Zealand and other parts of the world have found very similar statistics. A little less than 50% of children enjoy reading. Next slide. So, based on UNESCO, this is something that they've paid attention to, and a lot of research has pointed to how do we increase literacy among children and adults worldwide. There are several factors that challenge literacy. More so in the last couple of years, we've seen issues with access. We've seen issues with funding and budgets due to economic issues. But at an even lower level, you have to look at the individual child. They may have certain learning disabilities. They may have language deficiencies. They may have limited access to certain things. Schools may not be able to accommodate. And of course, lack of role models or a community, or even things like poverty and unstable childhood, all contributed to this issue with literacy and lack of reading for pleasure. So why does it matter? Why should we care so much about literacy and making sure children are enjoying reading? Well, first off, all the studies that are done by these numerous organizations have found that academic achievement and the foundation of developing a child all relies in the fact of early childhood reading and the continuation of reading throughout the ages. This, of course, builds cognitive and emotional skills that are important. As we know, reading is a taught skill, and it is acquired and developed through explicit learning over time. It is not something that is automatically learned. It's something that has to be cultivated. So by starting with children and focusing on pleasure for reading, you're taking that I have to do something and finding pleasure in doing the activity, similar to what they do with sports or video games, for example. Obviously, reading can create a relaxing and provide escapes from real life situations, and the overall well-being and healthy behaviors are established. Next slide. So what does the study say? So Cambridge University Press did a recent study in June that basically went over the effects of what reading does, pleasure reading does for individual students. They actually found a positive correlation between cognitive tests that have factors such as verbal learning, memory, and speech development were improved by children who read at an early age, or at least started reading at a upper elementary, early middle school age. They also found that the test showed that they had better mental well-being. They scored higher on critical things such as behavior problems, rule breaking. All this is kind of decreased within this study. So they also found interesting that reading for pleasure reduced less screen time, as example, watching television or playing video games, because students chose to use their time in a better fashion rather than doing those such activities. So this was a very comprehensive study. I encourage you to look it up and kind of read a little bit about what they found with these 10,000 adolescents. Next one. The IOU also did research to examine the effects of reading for pleasure on cognitive development specifically. No surprise, much like a lot of the other studies done internationally, there was more progress in math, vocabulary, spelling. There was obviously a higher level of engagement. A lot of times it correlated with higher test scores, higher achievements in education, larger confidence. So there was a large amount of the effects of reading for pleasure on helping cognitive development as students grow older. The Cambridge study also noted that there was actually an increased growth in some parts of the brain as well. So you see a variety of different studies supporting. So the National Library of New Zealand does a lot of research on this topic. And one of the things they concluded is, let's make it simple for people. How is it that reading can help children with their cognitive abilities? Well, simply, the more the children enjoy reading, the more they read, the more they read, the better they read, the better they read, the more they enjoy reading, and it becomes a cycle. It becomes a cycle, which I think is very important because a lot of times, wherever the cycle is broken, that's why children stop wanting to read, or when you get those obstacles, that's why sometimes this cycle isn't free flowing. But if you're all able to overcome, then this cycle progresses and you develop a whole community of young readers who become adult readers. So, why does it matter in terms of emotional well-being? Next slide. Well, again, studies have been exclusively showing the effects of emotional well-being in students. They're able to understand themselves. They're able to understand the world around them better. They learn empathy, social skills. There is a correlation between decreased mental illness and mental issues in children like anxiety and depression when they tend to be avid readers. There's a growth of confidence. There's an enjoyment and stimulation of imagination, which helps with their studies, which also helps them in adulthood with innovation and critical thinking and problem solving. Next slide. Obviously, I mentioned there's a lot of authors and other organizations doing research. The author, Nicola Morgan, has written various books on the positive choices of emotional well-being and relaxation associated with reading, especially in secondary level students. She really focuses on that it takes away the thoughts, that it helps them work through issues. For example, if they're going through a tough life event, there are books and things that they can read to try to figure out maybe other people's life experiences. There's the ability to create your own world and your own kind of reading environment, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit in terms of privacy and being able to create a place to do pleasure reading. But I encourage you to check out some of her books because it definitely supports this idea that pleasure for reading is not only something that we need to focus on in younger developing students, but also at the secondary and above levels. So how do we encourage more reading for pleasure amongst young people? Librarians, educators all over the world definitely struggle with this question. How do we get young people to read more in a world full of video games and handheld devices and phones? Well, we're going to go over, me and Zoe, a few things. The first is access. So being able to have access to a book, whether that be physical, digital, whether that's in school, at home, on the bus, on your way to school, wherever it is, simply having the ability to check out a book or have a book to be able to read is the first step. A lot of homes do not have books. A lot of schools don't even have libraries, and some countries don't even have public libraries. So being able to have access is the first step. Next is choice. So we are in an age that books are being scrutinized more than usual for various reasons. But at the end of the day, we are past the time when just a physical book and an audiobook is available. We have books and choices for every student, every child out there. So the right book, right student. You have audiobooks, read-alongs, graphic novels. You have books in different languages. Zoe will touch upon this in a little bit later, but I think it's very important that choice be at the top of our list because that is how you're going to find the way into finding a child for pleasure reading because they This is important for children. So privacy. So there's a multitude of things that privacy is important for. One of the things is sometimes you have students that are struggling learners, and they want to make sure that they have the ability to, the slides are going all over the place here. Okay, so privacy is important because you have children with maybe learning disabilities, or are interested in topics that might be controversial, or it might be a situation that they don't want other people to know. So privacy is important because not only are you giving them access to these books, you're giving them the choice of the book they want, whether that be an audiobook or an ebook or a physical book. But you're also giving them the ability to privately check out those books, privately read them, and process them in their own kind of space. And this is important because some children choose not to check out books because they're scared of being made fun of, or they're scared of what people might think, or maybe someone will find something out that they don't know. So privacy is very important, and creating an environment that says it's okay for you to check out that book, it is okay for you to read it, it is okay for you to enjoy it. Accessibility options is another thing. We do live in an age that we want to make sure that everyone has access to things, and this could include people who are hard of hearing. This could be somebody who might be blind. This might be someone with a learning disability. So finding those accessibility options for books are very important to connecting it to children who might say, I don't know how to read. I can't read because I have this limitation. Well, now we have situations where we can overcome those obstacles and get those books into those children's hands. So social and peer recognitions are very important. As I said, reading is both a social and independent thing. So with social media comes this idea that there's going to be influence from peers and social media that help children or young adults find books that they may like, whether it's a recommendation, whether it's in a community, like if your friends read, it makes it a little easier maybe for you to read. But this is also the opposite effect. Maybe your friends aren't interested in something you're interested in, but social media recommends a great title for you, and you said, well, that's interesting, I want to read it. Giving those different opportunities to students and children are very important with getting them the books that they want to read, not the ones they're being told to read. Rewards. So every child is different. Sometimes you have extrinsic rewards and sometimes you have intrinsic rewards when it comes to reading. Some enjoy that kind of external validation of reading, whether that's a competition, whether that's a reward, such as the one in Sora. Sometimes it's just having that confidence that they read and they were able to do something on their own. So rewards sometimes are a motivator for some students, not all students, but some. Making time. So this really has to do with some of our older children in middle school and high school ages. We have a lot of busy schedules. You have sports, you have school, you have preparing for exams, you have a lot of extracurricular activities. So when do you find time to read? Well, as anyone knows, it's not always easy to drive to your local library to check out a book. So giving the access, as we talked about, the number one thing, access, making time really has to do with once they have access to that book, whether it's physical or digital, it's being able to say, hey, you don't have to read for an hour, even 5 minutes counts. Whether you're riding on the bus, whether you're walking somewhere, you can listen to an audiobook. Maybe you have time to read when you're waiting for a sibling to finish practice. Maybe it's reading during class when you've finished all your work. Maybe it's just at the end of the day before bedtime when you just want to unwind. So making time in the busy world is really trying to re-educate children that reading isn't about reading an entire book. It isn't about having to sit there for hours on end and read. Really, it's little bits and pieces at a time, whether that's 5 minutes or an hour. That's really up to that individual student. And lastly, community. So studies have shown that children that are exposed to books in the home, whether they see their parents or caregivers reading them, whether they see friends reading them, whether they see teachers engaged in reading, there's a very strong correlation in my particular position here at OverDrive that a lot of successful reading programs relate to how much the community is involved in that particular child's environment. If they see their teacher reading, if their teacher is encouraging reading, if they're making it a normal thing, not something they're forced to do, but just a normal thing that they're allowed to do, this causes students to be like, oh, that's cool, reading's normal. This is just something we do for fun rather than something we're forced to do. Kremen in 2014 did a study on the reading for pleasure pedagogy, basically saying that to create a community of readers, you have to also create a community of reading teachers and also create a curriculum where you're not forcing students to read, but rather you're encouraging them to do independent reading. You're encouraging them to talk about what they're reading. You're encouraging them to read aloud if they feel comfortable. You're encouraging teachers to know about the books that the students are reading. And this creates an environment where everything is okay, like a safe space, a safe reading space. There's obviously extensive parts to this kind of method, but they have proven very successful that community, whether it's a public or school library, whether it's family, parents, teachers, this creates a place where reading is safe and fun and not something that they're forced to do. So, how a digital library supports students reading for pleasure. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Zoe Orcutt, who is going to go into a little bit more detail about some of the topics that I just covered. We feel that using practical knowledge is important because we have firsthand experience about how digital library does in fact support students reading for pleasure. We've had the pleasure of working with hundreds of schools that have had successful reading programs, who work alongside us to develop their libraries to meet the needs of their students and their staff and the community itself, whether that's through pleasure reading materials, whether that's through curriculum books. It's something that we definitely support. It really is about what do the students need. At the very front of it is always about what can we give the students to help them read for pleasure and find joy in it. So let me hand it over to my colleague, Zoe Orcutt.
Thank you, Laura. So as Laura said, I'm going to be covering a lot of practical applications for all of the topics discussed. So we can go to the next slide. And just as an example, we are going to be talking a bit about Sora. And what is Sora? I'm sure you guys have seen the logos on some of the slides that we've gone through previously, but Sora is a digital reading app that lets students access ebooks, audiobooks, and read-alongs from their school's digital library on any device. We have a screen grab on the left-hand side that just shows the digital reading platform, and it's kind of organized based off of collections. Sora was developed by OverDrive Education. It's used by 88,000 plus schools worldwide to achieve literacy goals. It's easy to curate, so schools can build a custom collection of digital books to meet students' reading and learning needs. You can see that based on how it's arranged, you can arrange it in curations. It's very easy to go on and add new books to your collection. It's very diverse, so you can choose from millions of flexibly priced titles from industry's largest catalog to meet your school's individualized needs. Next slide. So some of the practical applications that I'm going to be talking about, we've broken down for primary and secondary students. All of these applications that I'm talking about could be applied across K through 12, but these are just some of the applications that we're seeing for primary versus secondary. So the first one that I'm going to talk about are read-alongs. If you've never used a read-along before, it is a type of digital book where it's an ebook and it also has a narrative component as well. Words are spotlighted as they're read. So this can be a very powerful tool for language learning. I have an example on the screen. On the bottom left is Pete the cat, and you can see the spotlighted word in red. And then there's an audio component to that. In a digital library, or even if you have a physical library, this practice of reading along out loud is really important for language learning. So we have a screen grab from Sora of a collection arranged digitally of the read-alongs. So a student is able to just open it up and read along with the narrative component, with the audio. They can repeat the words that are spotlighted on the screen. Also, additionally, there's read-alongs in other languages. So I included some examples for Chinese, Spanish, and French. This is powerful for students that may be learning English, or if they speak a different language than is the language of instruction at your school, it can be very powerful. Or if you have language programs at your school, this can be used in the classroom there as well. It has many applications, but this is a really powerful way to engage students, especially if they might be a reluctant reader, or may need some help with pronunciation, need to grow their vocabulary. All of these are good options for that. Can we have the next slide? Next, I have comics and graphic novels. So if you've read a comic or a graphic novel, it is a sequential art that tells a story. And it's often formatted in a panel layout. These are also incredible options for reluctant readers because they promote interest and engagement. So within a digital library, you can have a collection curated for this. You may even have these in your physical library. So these are a very powerful tool. And I've included a few options here. There's sort of different levels of how much text is included. So as you can see with Diary of a Wimpy Kid, there's a lot more text than my other example, Seance Tea Party. So really a student is able to choose how much text versus image they would like to engage with. And there's various levels too, so a student can work up to a copy with more text if they are having some difficulty with reading. It also supports differentiation across student learning styles. So a student may prefer to read in this way. So having these options available for them are important to just continuously engage them. And you can see there's lots of popular comics and graphic novels that I included. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but as you can see in the curated digital collection above, we have Sonic, we've got Minecraft, Plants vs. Zombies, and Mario. So lots of ties to popular culture too with these comics and graphic novels that can engage students. Next slide.
I'd just like to add real quick, because it's something that we talk about very often during our meetings, is just how popular this particular type of books are, these comics and graphic novels, and how successful they have been at various schools in increasing reading. Can you tell us any examples that you know of working with any of the schools internationally that you've had any success with graphic novels?
Yeah. So I have a bunch of schools that these are sort of the most popular types of books in the collection. So a lot of the digital collections that I work with, they'll have many holds on a lot of these books, and depending on if you offer them digital or not, a lot of students Like for instance, if they're offered digitally, the student is able to kind of like, if there's a series, they're able to check out multiple books in the series as they go through them. So yeah, offering these are a really great option and are extremely engaging, probably some of the most engaging books, most engagement and highest checkouts that I've seen across schools that I work with. All right, and next we have potentially engaging students with reading events and rewards, as we talked about. So one of the ways that I've seen schools engage students is to have some of these reading competitions. And again, we're talking about a digital example here, but this can even be like a physical option in your library, or you can offer both physical and digital, but engaging students in a way to compete with each other with reading. So one example that I have is that Battle of the Books primary readers actually comes from Hong Kong. Hong Kong's international schools do a battle of the books. So they compete, well, the books compete against each other, and then there's a book at the very end of the competition that is the most read. So this is an example of that, but there's also, I've seen reading competitions at schools where students compete with each other or classes compete with each other. Just creating that level of competition can be a tool for engagement. And it can be a competition, or you can also have it centered around an event or a holiday in your region. I have an example of back to school. We have a number of schools that we work with that do summer reading programs, and they provide those materials digitally for students when the library is closed during the summer. So when the physical library is closed during the summer. So this can be a really good way to engage students when they're away from school, and also in school with these competition-like events. One of the really interesting examples that I can point to in terms of engagement is some of the libraries that I've worked with even put QR codes within the physical books that link to the digital. So in case a student is in the library and they want to link to the digital version of one of these competition books, or you know, if they find a book in a library display for an event and they want to link to the digital, that can be a very powerful tool to connect both the physical and digital. And then we did talk a bit about awards, and so offering like an award or a reward within some of these competitions. If a student kind of has something to work up to, like a goal, that can be a big motivator for them. I've included some of the reading badges that we have on Sora, but you can also implement this in your physical library as well. But just giving them sort of little goals or little badges or rewards to work up to can definitely motivate them. Laura, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's very important that you mentioned the summer reading programs, because we've had quite a few schools that did that as a way to engage throughout the summer, and we had positive feedback through that. It's also a way to get the students engaged in what they want to read toward the end of the year. So once you're creating these kind of, we're back to school, look at these fun books, and you're cultivating this throughout the year, by the time the summer comes and they're like, well, I really love this particular book series, or I want to make sure that I can read something, but my library is closed, what am I going to do? Maybe they don't have access to the public library. So this really goes back to that, having that access. And that's why a digital library is so important, especially for those kind of pauses. Same thing with, you know, winter holidays or different holidays throughout the year, making sure that the students always have the ability to check out a book. And you're going to talk a little bit about audiobooks, but QR codes also work great for the physical books to connect to an audiobook, for example. Maybe a student wants to read a book, but they really want to listen to it too. It's similar to like a read along, but a little different. But that's another way that you can encourage different reading while giving the student that privacy that they need, that access, and then that decision on format and accessibility.
One quick question that came in that I just thought was relevant to answer now while we're on this topic. The collections that you show here, I think some of the schools may have curated them themselves, but the question was related to how much support, specifically with Sora, does the Sora team provide? Because time is often an issue for teachers and librarians to curate collections like this themselves. So could you talk just briefly about any level of support that the team does offer to create if they wanted to do something similar but didn't have as much time?
Yeah, sure. I can speak on that. So we do offer a lot of support to schools who use Sora. Some of these curations are curated by the schools of the examples that I've shown, but some of them are curated by our librarians. Each school that uses Sora has a dedicated staff librarian that helps them with collection development, curation, all of these curations that are shown. Like that's one way that we can support, but also we do collection development support as well. So we do offer a lot of support to librarians. We know that time is something that is a lot of school librarians are very busy, so we know that offering that service is really helpful. And then collection development, sometimes, as we talked about, there's many titles that are out there. It's really hard to keep track of everything that is coming out, so we offer collection development support as well to kind of help sift through all that material and find books that would be engaging for that particular library, school, community.
Great, thank you.
All right, and then finally, for primary, this was my last kind of example of how you could engage students with language content. So I have a few slides on, or a few screen grabs on here of some options of how you could curate a digital French collection or Chinese collection. So offering these language options is another way to offer choice. So depending on your community that you're in, if you have students that are speaking a different language from the language of instruction, offering that native language content is really important to their support and improving accessibility to that particular student. These language options also have curricular use applications, depending on if you have language programs at your school. We have language options, as I mentioned before, for a lot of these different formats. So for the read-alongs, if you have a French language program at your school and you want to have some French read-alongs for students to use curricularly while they're learning the language, that's an option. Also, if you have students learning another language, or if they're learning the language of instruction at your school, then it's important to offer the read-alongs to help with that instruction. This can be for students, teachers, and their families. So if we're thinking about the library as a tool for students, but also to the overarching school community, these also have use applications for teachers and family members of students. There's also language options in multiple formats. So if you offer ebooks and audiobooks in other languages, those can help with, as we've discussed, language learning. The audiobooks helping with modeling and pronunciation and vocab. So offering language options is another way to engage students who are speaking multiple languages.
Yeah, I definitely support everything that Zoe had said. Throughout my years teaching English and also working here at OverDrive, you know, for different language books is priceless. If you have a situation where a student is in a foreign country, their first language is not the local language, we talk about emotional well-being, we talk about supporting the student where they are, and books are a way for them to escape. If everyone around them is speaking in a language that they're not so great at, being able to have a book or listen to a book in their native language helps with their mental. It makes them feel at home while they're trying to become accustomed to where they live. And a lot of international schools can sometimes have 40 plus different nationalities represented, which has a variety of different languages. Some countries have multiple languages. And books can be sometimes difficult. I'm a foreign language learner myself, and it is not always easy to find physical books in different languages, especially ones at your level or the ones that you want to read. So digital collections really help because it gives you more of that variety. So maybe they want to read Harry Potter, but they want to read it in a different language than English. Well, luckily that is available. Maybe they want to listen to it. That is also available. So being able to have that access is another way for them to feel, children and adults, to feel very comfortable in their reading, because it isn't about reading in English. That's not what we need. It's just reading. And so making sure they have access to those books in whatever language that they want, in whatever format, is very important. And it is something that's been very widely successful in our international schools, because we have over 150 languages represented in our catalog, which means we're able to sometimes get books for students that didn't think there was any books in their particular language. And that creates this joy in them and excitement that, oh my gosh, there's a book for me. And really that is what it is, that we're trying to connect that pleasure, that excitement, that enjoyment with whatever book, whatever format, whatever language that student needs or child.
All right, so next we're going to be talking about some applications for secondary students, but as I said before, a lot of these applications can be applied to K through 12 in general. We're just sharing some options that could potentially be used for secondary. All right, so first up is curricular titles. So you'll see in the top curation some popular titles that are taught in schools. And so offering these digital can be a great tool for the classroom. So actually putting the digital library into the classroom. We have schools that use curricular titles in class, and then also just offering that as an option outside of class if they'd like to go back and read a book they may have read earlier in the year, giving them the option to check out some of the titles that they are using in class is very important. We also have, and I wanted to share the option for graphic novel adaptations of classic titles. We talked about how comics and graphic novels can be really important for reluctant readers. And so if you have a reluctant reader in your class and you're covering a text like The Great Gatsby, offering a graphic novel adaptation can be important to get a reluctant reader engaged. They can also be used as like a compare contrast when teaching in the classroom. And so readers can explore the catalog offerings in addition to their required reading. So say they read a book in class and they fall in love with the author and they want to be able to explore that author. Having those options and kind of tying in the curriculum to some of the titles that you offer in the library is important. And so just going over some of the curricular comics I've included, we've got some really popular ones like Nathan's Hazardous Tales. We've got the Percy Jackson series. And then also, there's some options with like The Great Gatsby, The Giver graphic novel, the I Survive series. So really expanding the options that students have within the type of material they're interacting with, and then also, giving them the option to kind of link back into their curricular titles via the digital library. The next topic that we have here is audiobooks. We talked about audiobooks a few times earlier in this presentation, so this is their kind of time to shine. Offering audiobooks is very important as like a format differentiation. So I know that, many students, everybody has their preferences, their reading preferences. Some students might want to read comics and graphic novels, and that's what they like. Some students might, want to listen to an audiobook. We talked about, making time for reading and maybe being able to listen to an audiobook while you're on the go. Having those format options, not just the physical, but digital and also audiobooks, are really important. They can promote accessibility by offering an accommodation for a student, but it can also be just a personal preference. So you might, depending on how a student wants to read, offering them that choice to be able to listen to an audiobook if they don't want to read an ebook or read a physical book is really important. Audiobooks are also available in other languages, so that's also an option for students. If we talked about offering language content and it sort of opening the door for students to be able to choose, I want to read this and I want to read it in this language. They're also able to listen to books in other languages. There's popular translated titles. There's books that are in native languages, published and written in native languages. So just being able to offer a student the ability to choose and kind of tailoring that to your community is important. I've included some audiobooks on here: Popular, The Wild Robot, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So just, offering that choice. If you have it in your physical library and you might have an ebook of it, offering an audiobook is important. And then finally, just talking a bit about audiobooks and their applications for learning and language learning. So audiobooks can expand listeners' working vocabulary. So when a student hears a word used in the book that they might not know, it helps model the use of that word and the pronunciation of it. It can offer enriched engagement with characters and concepts, depending on the narrator. A student might want to listen to an audiobook of a celebrity biography that's read by the celebrity. So it can be engaging in different ways that the physical book isn't, especially through that narration. We talked about modeling pronunciation, but also pacing and rhythms suited to each book. It also provides strong readers with opportunities to build critical skills. And then just a bit with language learning, and that pronunciation and pacing can be extremely important as well. Next slide. Also for secondary students, it could be beneficial to offer a magazine collection. So you may already have a magazine or periodicals collection in your physical library. A lot of schools use magazines in the classroom, but they're also offered digitally as well. So you can engage students with both physical and digital magazines. One thing that we find extremely important across our schools is the ability of these digital magazines to be accessed instantly, and that new issues are delivered instantly. So making a case for the digital, if you struggle with any issues with access in your community, if you perhaps don't have a public library system, or the public library system isn't close by, or if you have issues getting physical materials delivered to you, having those options accessible instantly is really important, especially if you use these for news or if in the classroom for current events or for instruction. Having that option accessible instantly is extremely important. And then again, we've talked a bit before how this can be for students, teachers, parents, and family members. So you're able to offer magazines across a wide variety of topics for a wide variety of audiences. There's many magazines, but I've included a few. We've got the Bluey for juvenile audiences, and then we've got some for adult audiences with Better Homes and Gardens cooking magazines and How to Train Your Dog, also magazines in other languages. It's really, it can be really effective to build your magazine collection kind of with your community in mind.
Yeah, and I just want to touch upon that on some of the things I've seen. So earlier I talked about community. I talked about when children see the adults in their life reading and engaging. Magazines count as reading. Everything counts as reading. And I think there's power in that. So even if someone is just reading a magazine, they're still reading, and they're showing that that is something, they're modeling behavior essentially. So whether it's a teacher, parent, family members, if they're opening it just as much, then there tends to be an imitation. Because they're like, oh, they're reading, I want to read. And the other thing we sometimes find with these magazines is they can pique the interest of other topics. And then students might say, hey, do you have any books about this? Or do you have any books about this? And that is a great outlet to start building and finding what it is that the children want to read for pleasure, and then building your library around that.
All right, and then this is our last application example, but we talked a bit about book talk and page to stream, and so this would be peer recommendations and topics that are coming up on social media. This is extremely important to highlight in your digital library and your physical library. A lot of students, they may come in contact with some of these books in the library, and it might be the first time that they see them, but odds are they might have seen them on TikTok, or they might have seen them as a adaptation, as a movie or a TV show. They might have seen them on another social media platform. So offering books that are popular on those platforms is extremely important, because odds are there's going to be students that are going to be looking for them in your collection. So you're able to do that in your digital collection and physically through book displays, highlight trending titles. Here's some options, examples that I have. So we have a book talk made me read it. And so those are trending titles on TikTok. And then we've got page to stream. So books that were made into movies and TV shows. So creating digital displays or creating physical displays around these can help a student, immediately identify, hey, that's the movie that I watched last night. I want to read it as a book. Or, hey, I saw this on TikTok or on Instagram last night. I want to check this title out because somebody recommended it to me. Those can be very powerful tools to getting students books that they're interested in. You can also offer next in series. So if it's maybe a movie that has a sequel and it's book series that has a sequel, a student can read the next book in the series if they're interested. They can also say that there's a upcoming adaptation and it's not released yet, and you have the book highlighted so that people can read the book before the adaptation comes out. That's another application featuring upcoming adaptations. So I have a few examples on here. We've got the Heartstopper series. I believe the 5th one comes out in December. So that's a really popular one that I see in these types of collections, especially as we have more books coming out. And it was made into a Netflix series. We have one that's come up recently that's been incredibly popular, a resurgence, is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That was made into a popular movie this past summer, and it's gotten a huge resurgence in terms, students being interested in it once again as the movie came out. So yeah, this popular books can really drive reading, especially if they have a social media connection or a TV or movie connection. And I think this was my last slide. Laura, did you have anything to add here? Otherwise, we can move on to the Q&A.
Yeah, I think we can move on to questions and answer. I think we've covered quite a bit today.
We have, and I've kept an eye. A lot of the questions have been answered through the slides that have come up. One question, which I believe we touched a little bit on, but maybe it's worth reiterating some of the gateway paths to getting struggling readers interested, but was related to, how can we help students get started if they're not sure really what's of interest to them, or books in general don't seem interesting. I think we talked about this in a lot of different ways, but potentially could either of you speak to what are good kind of gateway entries, or how do we help a student who's like, I'm just not interested at all, and really opening that door for them?
I can speak a bit on this, and then maybe Laura, you can add a few things. But one of the ways that I found to kind of pique interest is to make sure that you have, like, as I just talked about with the book talk and the page to stream, materials that are really popular within popular culture. So with the book talk, so offering books that might be related to TV shows or video games they might be playing, or movies they might have seen. Also, many of the comics and graphic novels that I shared and had examples for, a lot of those had ties to popular culture. So that's one way that I think is important to start with. And then also just offering those format differences, or different types of options for students to sort of explore. Laura, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, some of my schools, they start with the children's hobbies or interest. For example, boys, they love sports, or at least a lot of them love sports. So especially when we have things like the World Cup, or during football season, or soccer, if you're from the US, having books available on their role models, right? Like, Lionel Messi was a very popular book for a while because he's a very popular football player. If a child is interested in cooking, if a child is interested in animals, if a child's interested in whatever their interest is, that's sort of where you start. And it's really about piquing their interest. So as Zoe said, graphic novels have been exceptionally easy because a lot of students don't think they're reading. They think they're looking at a comic book, or they think they're looking at pictures. And for them, that might not in their brains be like reading. Another way, as Zoe said earlier with the curriculum, when you're able to offer students in a curriculum format, different formats, say a graphic novel, rather than the novel itself. Sometimes that's enough to pique their interest, because for them, when you give them this novel, and if they struggle with a learning difficulty, or if they have certain, obstacles in their way, by taking those obstacles away and showing them, hey, this is fun, even though you have to read that this is fun. Or if they have an interest in something, making sure that you're listening to their feedback. Say, I really love this particular, series, making sure you stay on top of getting that series in the library. And then asking students, like, what are you interested in? And not necessarily what are you interested in reading, just what are you interested in? Like, what makes you excited? Also listening to students. What are they talking about? What are their conversations about? What are they excited about? And trying to find things like that to relate to them. And then, of course, the other thing that I mentioned a few times, modeling. If a teacher is talking about a book that is a book that all the students may like to read, if they're engaged and knowledgeable about books for the age group that they work with, sometimes that's enough to get them intrigued. Like, oh, my teacher knows about this. I'd love to talk to my teacher about that. And this works for parents and the community as well. Being able to talk about things that you enjoy, and then in essence, a book that they might enjoy, or exposing them to something and just getting them interest. Sometimes that's enough to be like, yeah, I want to try that. I want to read that. And if they find that this book is too hard, book's too hard for me to read, then you say, okay, well, let's get you the audio version. Let's give you another version. And then that might be enough to want them to read more.
Great. Thank you both. I am going to wrap it up just to kind of respect everyone's time here. Of course, if you have additional questions, if you have any interest at all in discovering Sora and exploring that for your school, or just in general would like any more information on anything discussed today, I've left up some of the contact information for how to get in touch with our team here. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this has made me want to go listen to an audiobook, so I'm going to go do that. I appreciate everyone's time, and thank you both, Laura and Zoe. We will see you next time.